Hi, today is October 4th. My name is Rob Snyder, and I am part of the class of 1989.
So why don't you tell us a little bit more about your time here in Frostburg, what your memories are?
uh, when I started here, it was Frostburg State College. So we didn't transfer into university until I think my end of my sophomore year, something like that, which is the same time I found out that my great 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 grandfather was John Leake, who founded Frostburg State. He was the state senator that proposed at the Capitol that we have a school dedicated to teachers, which was the state normal school number two. I think number one was in Salisbury, if I'm correct. But the second one was here. And he went along or went around to all the miners in the area and collected money. And they all chipped in and they bought where the Frost Hall, what was that called on the top of the hill, the old building that's
Old Main, actually.
Old Main. The land that Old Main sits on, that's what they bought, was that land. And that was the very first part of Frostburg, which is kind of cool.
Very cool that your family was part of that.
So I got a chance because I found it out, they had the dedication to the room for the first dedication for the room for John. And my grandmother was invited, and then I was asked on behalf of the family to speak, which there were, I don't know how many people were in the room. It was huge. And I was scared to death. Uh, and my family thought it was hilarious that I was the one that was speaking for all. So I stood up, and as soon as I opened my mouth, the system went off and they were doing announcements. And I had to wait until they went and turned it off for the room. And it just threw me a little bit. I recovered, but my whole family died, and they teased me about it for years. So it was a great memory. I had fantastic memories here. I was very involved in student life. So I was president of my dorm for a couple of years, which was Allen Hall. And at that time, you could pledge to be in a fraternity, but our dorm of guys got along so well, you were able to move in your sophomore year down campus for the air conditioning. And we got along so well that all of the guys in my dorm that I started with 3 years later were all still in the dorm, in the same rooms, it became like a family to us. I see my roommate from college was in my wedding years later. So it was a family bond, not only from my own personal family, but the family that I created once I was here.
That's great. So you lived on campus the whole time?
Except my senior year, if I wanted to graduate, I had to make sure that my grades were good enough, and I went and lived off campus next to my grandparents. Actually, they could keep an eye on me to make sure that I was going to class. In fact, if it wasn't for my grandmother, I wouldn't have graduated, because many times I got a phone call at 8 o'clock in the morning asking me why I wasn't headed to class at that time, which was great. I always thank them for what they gave me and allowed me to graduate. But it was a thrill. Herb Reinhardt was the president at the time, so I got to meet him. There were a bunch of people here as far as professors that I just adored and talked to years. Hank Bullimore was in the geography department. And he and a couple other professors were the reason I got my first job out of college. And which was funny because I was an urban planning major, and somebody saw planning on my resume and they made me an environmental planner. I had to learn how to spell environment. I had no idea what they were talking about. And from there, I became an environmental scientist, and then a nuclear scientist, and a telecommunications engineer, and then owned my own companies. I own a company today, and I think it was my springboard. If I wouldn't have had that general, basic learning how to think education, I never would have got to where I am.
It's really cool that you can see the development from, your major to the different courses in your
Yeah, whoever thought that urban planning, that I would be doing the things that I'm doing today? I do nothing that was even close to my original thought for a major. I was going to come here and be a teacher, and then After 2 years, I decided maybe teaching wasn't my skill set. My organization skills weren't high enough for what it requires of a teacher. But I married a teacher, so kept it in the family, I guess.
Were you part of any clubs or organizations?
I sang, so I was part of the choir and did madrigal singers. In fact, we did a madrigal dinner right before Christmas every year, where we dressed up in the great big hats of back in the, I guess, 14th century, 15th century, what it was. And we all had little dances that we had learned and had to wear the tights, which they teased me at the time because I'm 6'2", 6'3". They had a hard time finding tights for me. But it was hilarious. I enjoyed every single minute. In fact, it was funny. A lot of the guys that probably wouldn't have gone to anything musical in my dorm, they all came to see my performances when I sang. And they wouldn't have done that if they hadn't known me. It wasn't their backgrounds or something they would be interested in. But because it was me, they all came. And that always meant a lot. So I love that family that I had. And I've missed a lot of those people that I haven't seen in many, many years. I'm hoping I run into somebody on campus today that I can recognize.
I hope so. What was your favorite hangouts other than your dorm?
Well, I hate to say the Repub was a definite hangout for me. It was years later after I got married that I actually walked back into the Repub. It was everybody was off campus, so it was in between semesters. And when I walked in, all the bartenders turned around and went, "Rob," and I hadn't been in there in 4 or 5 years. So she kind of looked at me, and I heard it for the next couple of days of, "What did you do with your college life?" This was part of it. So I enjoyed it while I was here, but I had a great time. We had a chance to bring concerts here when I was here. I was involved in a lot of the musical things that went on. I still remember Crazy Scott. He was one of the guys that did the DJs stuff around here. He was from Hagerstown, and I would see him years later, commiserate with him. In fact, I think the president of the Alumni Association is Pat Friel, if I'm not mistaken. And he was my RA when I was at Allen Hall. So I'm hoping he's here today so that I can meet him.
Great. You mentioned some instructors, some professors you had, and that you were, what your major was, but did you have a favorite class? Because we've had some folks that maybe their major and their favorite class weren't the same.
Well, music was my favorite. I loved singing, and I loved being involved in that. In fact, I have a music company today because I enjoy music so much. One of the things that we had done in our concerts, our professors, they came up to me afterwards and they asked me to become a voice major. And I can still remember going home and telling my father, "Hey, I want to be a voice major." He said, "That's not going to pay anything. So maybe you should think of something else. Maybe think that may not be a career for you." And I'm glad he did. I'm glad he did push me away from that because that's business is so hard. But I always wonder if I would have been a voice major, where my life would have taken me a different path at that time. But I have no regrets. I enjoy what I do today, and I enjoy the things I do today. So I think it all worked out in the end.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that you think that your time at Frostburg sort of shaped eventually owning your company.
Yeah.
You want to share a little bit about that?
One of the things that was really funny, we were doing an urban planning. So my mother always said I was a born salesman when I was growing up. All through high school, you're a born salesman, you should do sales, but be a teacher. Because that's all we knew in this area is you went to Frostburg to be a teacher. But a couple of projects we did with urban planning were marketing type projects. We were going out and writing these papers on and these programs and packets on bringing business to this area. And it wasn't something that I had ever done before or thought about before, but it got me into the marketing side. And now I'm a vice president of business development for a company in Tyson's Corner, Virginia, called Hervidium. And I know I probably wouldn't have taken the path if it wasn't for that class that I had, because it got me really involved in, it got my creative side and involved. And I've always been very creative, and I've really enjoyed that side of it. And I do marketing today. Wasn't my major, but I still enjoy it.
That's great. Is there anything else that you want to share about your time here at Frostburg?
One of the things that I think about being back on campus, I mean, it's great to see all the new buildings and the growth of the campus. I wish more people would consider this school as their first choice. What they can see in the school of what they get out of it. In fact, that's why I talked to Dr. Smith and said, what can I do as an alum to come back and say, please go to Frostburg State. This is an experience that, no, you're not down at the University of Maryland. A lot of people in our state, that's their first choice. It's not Towson. It's not Salisbury. It's a community here. The community loves the students and feeds off of that. And I think that people should make this their first choice.
We're so happy to have you here today, and thank you for your time, and look forward to talking to you in the future maybe.
Hopefully. Thank you.